A crack has emerged within the MAGA movement after the resignation of Republican Congresswoman and former Trump ally Marjorie Taylor Greene. Joining us live from the United States is our analyst Michael Ware for this and more. Good to see you, Michael. Thanks for your time. So, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's not a central player in the grand scheme of things, but she did tick a lot of MAGA boxes. Epstein, military interventionism, which is growing. But are the cracks there?
Well, isn't that the great question here about Marjorie Taylor Greene's announcement this morning that not only is she not seeking re-election in the House, but she's not going to run for president in the next cycle? I'd put a question mark or an asterisk on that one. Look, Marjorie Taylor Greene is really a canary down the mine. She wasn't just MAGA. She was a MAGA flag bearer. She loved President Trump and President Trump loved her. But what she symbolises is that within this incoherent thing that is the MAGA movement, there are certain core principles that President Trump doesn't necessarily align with, especially now that he's in office. And she represents those core principles. At the top of that list of principles was releasing the full Epstein files. In many ways, she was pivotal to forcing Donald Trump to do an about course, a complete reversal, and agree to sign the bill, if presented to him, to release the full Epstein files. But as you touch upon, it's military interventionism and other things. She also represents the MAGA drive for affordability, which President Trump, in all the polling, is completely underwater on. He's losing big time on the economy. He's even losing on immigration. And she was a huge proponent for immigration reform. So on some of these core MAGA principles, President Trump is getting smacked about in the polls. Marjorie Taylor Greene stood up to him very publicly, more so than any other MAGA stalwart has. And she won on the issue, the Epstein files, but perhaps she's lost out overall because President Trump said, I'm not going to support your renomination and I'll back someone who's going to run against you. And she seems to have crumpled in the face of President Trump's might within the MAGA movement.
So more broadly, Michael, I mean, year two of term two is upon us. And as one congressman said overnight, Trump is still the biggest dog in the pound. But I mean, this comes for everyone. I know Trump is different gravy, but are we approaching lame duck status soon?
It's funny you mention that because that term is being thrown around, that President Trump may become a lame duck president. Because if you believe the polling and the political currents right now, the Republican Party, led by President Trump, is coming up for a shellacking in the midterms in about a year. And so that's when he'd become a lame duck. If he lost the House and can't control the Senate or loses the Senate, President Trump is completely powerless. So yes, the possibility that President Trump could become a lame duck is actually being spoken of here in the United States. And like I said, his polling is so underwater, a snorkel wouldn't help him right now. And that's a crisis he and the party have to address before the midterm.
So at what point, and maybe we're seeing this now with Marjorie Taylor Greene, at what point do the loyalists fracture and then conspire as they jockey for their own futures?
Yeah, well, only time will tell, because the great question is, if you're a MAGA member of the House of Representatives on a 2-year term, are you more fearful of the president or are you more fearful of the MAGA base? Because, Trump may disown you or he may support you, but what's first and foremost in your mind as a candidate is getting the votes extracted yet again from the MAGA base. And the MAGA base no longer exactly aligns with President Trump's principles or his agenda. I'm telling you, even MAGA voters are leaving him, if you can believe the poll.
Okay, just a final note on this, and this is part of it too. Ukraine and Russia has been a big part of his focus and a big part of his plan over the past several years now. So now that we are, as Marco Rubio said, having some quite positive discussions, he said overnight, some of the best that they've had throughout the course of the war. Are we sort of inching towards some kind of conclusion here, Michael?
Mate, do you have a crystal ball? Because I don't. As you touch upon, we just saw about 45 minutes ago, Secretary of State Marco Rubio come out from behind closed doors in Geneva, where he's been meeting with the Ukrainians and with national security advisors from Europe. And he was absolutely giddy. It's almost like there's feverish activity happening right now, and it's almost as if we're on the precipice of a deal. But to just give you a broad outline, this is a deal that was proposed by Russia about 3 weeks ago. And the Americans have been mulling it, but it's on what has been released publicly is on Russia's terms. You know, it threatens to be, Trump's Neville Chamberlain Munich moment where it's appeasement at all costs, peace at all costs. But if you listen to the Secretary of State as he just came out behind those closed doors, it's not quite like that. He's now saying, look, we spent 3 weeks getting the Russian proposal. It's clear they drafted it. We've knocked that around a bit and we've now taken it to the Ukrainians and to Europe. And he's saying, this has been the most meaningfully successful negotiation we've had ever. And this is a living, breathing document. But he said, Russia still gets a vote and there's still plenty of work to do. But today, we've narrowed down the 28 points to the really crucial points that remain open. Bottom line, Russia has not backed off from its maximalist position. Ukraine can't join NATO, it's got to limit its military, and it has to give us territory that we don't even yet occupy. And the Americans have been acting as though they support that. Now, behind closed doors, amidst this giddiness that the Secretary of State has shown us, perhaps there's actually been real movement. President Trump has given Ukraine until this Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, to come to a deal. Marco Rubio made it clear that wasn't a hard and fast date, but that gives you an impression that the Trump administration is trying to shove this deal through now while it can.
Okay. We'll be watching it closely. Michael, good to see you as always.